Hello everyone and welcome to today's Adapting in 2020 webinar. We'll just wait a couple of moments for everyone to join us. While we're doing that, I invite you all to open your chat function, toggle it to all panelists and attendees, and let us know your name and where you're joining us from. And we'll get started in a couple of moments. Okay, we've actually got a sellout today, which is fantastic. So we're just having everyone join. We've got Margaret from Sydney. Hello, Margaret. We hope you haven't been washed away up there. We've got Carla on the line who's in Bowral and has it received a bit of rain, Carla.
Oh yeah, we had last Sunday we got 120 mil. Our dams we haven't seen our dams this full for probably 17 years.
Wow.
It's great.
Fantastic. We've got people coming in from the Lockyer Valley, University of Melbourne, Canberra. Wonderful. So we hope everyone's keeping safe and well. We've got the eastern seaboard covered in today's panel. I'm in Melbourne, so is Alana. We've got Kelly up in Queensland and, as I said, Carla in New South Wales. So just a reminder, if you've just joined us, if you want to open your chat function, toggle it to all panelists and attendees, and just let us know your name and where you're joining us from today, and we'll get started shortly. Gemma, hello from Melbourne. We've got quite a few from Melbourne. Tracy from Geelong, hello, just down the road from us. Matt from Sydney. It's fantastic to have you all here. Okay, well, we might make a start. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is the 7th webinar in the Adapting in 2020 webinar series that Fetching Events and Communications started up 5 months ago. Can you believe it's 5 months? Goodness. When we entered this crazy world. It's been fantastic to have, I know there's some familiar names and faces joining us today. It's fantastic to have you join us again, and to those joining us for the first time, welcome. So today we're going to talk about reimagining venues in the new world of events. And this really is a conversation. So I do encourage you to pop comments in the chat function if you've got any questions. Hopefully we'll have time for them at the end. And we do want this to be very much an interactive and a two-way, or should we say 4+ chat function way conversation. So my name's Georgie. I'm the founder and chief engagement officer at Fetching Events and Communications, and I will be your host today. And I will warn you, there's some jackhammering going on outside my house. So if you hear a bit of buzzing, don't be alarmed. So before I introduce our panel, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting. And we can see from the chat function we are joining from all over Australia. So I'd like to pay my respects to them and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So today's webinar, our panel discussion, is being recorded, and we will send a copy of this out to you this afternoon. So as we move into the new world of events, and a world that we know is constantly changing, and we only probably need to look, well, to Melbourne, close to home, or to New Zealand to see that the road into a COVID-safe world will be a road full of U-turns for some of us. For some of us, hopefully not, it'll be a straight road. But it is changing the way we're thinking about venues, whether it's social distance, our venue spaces, I should say, whether it's social distancing, whether it's how we're using our space for hybrid events. And that's really what we want to have a look at today, and hopefully give you some ideas on, if you're an event manager, how you can run your event and think outside the box. And if you're a venue, how you might be able to repurpose some of your event spaces. And I'm thrilled to welcome our panel today. So we've got Carla joining us from the conference shop.
Hi,
Welcome,
Georgie.
Carla.
Hi.
We've got Alana from Art Centre Melbourne. Thanks so much, Alana, for joining us.
Not a worry.
And we've got Kelly up in sunny Queensland. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Georgie.
So Carla, I might start with you. As a venue sourcing organisation, the conference shop obviously deals with lots of venues. And as events start up, and I guess I'd preface this conversation that everyone in Australia and in fact the world is at a different stage. So we've got Queensland running events. In Melbourne, we're, you know, a fair way off running live events, but we're still planning. as events do start to open up or people start to think ahead to their live events, how are you seeing venues respond?
Look, I think apart from being absolutely excited that events are restarting, they're quite cautious and being as responsible as possible. I know the last discussion we had with you was about, you know, being COVID safe. So I think venues have sort of are really trying to apply in that way as much as possible and putting in place their COVID safe plans. I think in terms of events themselves, they're starting to be a lot more aware of the whole social distancing thing and trying to be creative in terms of the food delivery. Again, we talked about that once before. So when they're breaking, they're starting to do individual boxes and maybe people can go outside or sit somewhere rather than just be standing there with their little food box. But I think the biggest thing that they're doing is becoming more aware of the whole hybrid kind of event. And that seems to be huge now, even for events moving forward. And especially in light of Melbourne and now New Zealand, I think there's a lot of trepidation from people trying to lock in events because they're afraid of, you know, how it will look or what will happen if they have to shift from a full event to a hybrid event. So I'm finding venues are being a lot more flexible in terms of even cancellation policies or being able to adapt to a hybrid event.
Yep. And it's such a good point, because often when we think of a COVID safe event, all the elements that go with that, but a major element is that social distancing. So it takes a room capacity. And I know a gala dinner I'm working on has gone from a capacity of 500 in the ballroom to 200 maximum.
Yeah.
But that's not the only impact on venue spaces. As you say, it's the hybrid. So if you're running a hybrid event, it's probably not just a static camera and camera platform at the back of the room. There is other equipment because you need to make it engaging. And then that impacts on how you use the space, and maybe a space that you would have filmed in actually isn't the best space. And we certainly see the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre in Melbourne has, you know, and a lot of venues and Melbourne showgrounds as well are setting up dedicated studios in their space.
Yes. Yeah. Look, even some of the regional properties, they're being, I guess, in terms of reusing space or thinking outside the square, there's properties in regional New South Wales that are now utilising outdoor spaces that they probably didn't think of using before because it was so easy to just keep everyone in that one space and under that one roof. So now they're being more creative in terms of how they're using their outdoor facilities. And that's really a great thing, because that's even as part of the conference, not just a breakout or just for a DDP, like a morning tea or afternoon tea. This is actually as part of their conferencing strategies, which I think is a really good thing.
I think that's great. And, you know, we've been dealt this awful pack of cards, we'll say. But out of this, we can find opportunities. And you know, some events might be able to run as they did, and that's terrific. There's no need to change them, but it does give us an opportunity to really think about how we can enhance the visitor experience, because we know the visitor experience is going to be impacted by the COVID safe world of events. And it's thinking about how we can look at venues, spaces, and we're not talking about knocking down walls or, you know, completely reconfiguring, but actually look at existing spaces and how we can use those. And, you know, you touched on the food element and moving outside. And Caroline, who's on the line with us today, who joined us in our last panel discussion, talked about they're now serving, or they're looking at serving packed lunches, the conference lunches, from a safety point of view, and saying head over across the road to the beach, Caroline's at SeaWorld Conference Centre, and eat your lunch there. So they're not even looking at reimagining the spaces in their venues. They're looking at reimagining the spaces around them, which I think is fantastic. It's no cost. It's easy. You know, it's rather than stand awkwardly eating your picnic inside. You know, go for a share. Granted, not everyone in Australia has that luxury of weather, but you know, we're not just thinking inside the venue, outside. Carla, you were talking about a regional venue that's starting to move and look at using their outdoor spaces. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
So the venue is in the Blue Mountains. So it's a Fairmont resort. They have a lot of outdoor spaces. A lot of regional areas do, and they're very lucky, but not everybody's taking advantage of that. So I think like you're saying, it's about thinking outside the square and not just going, okay, same old, we'll just, and I think it's not just same old. I think it's because we've been caught unawares. This sort of happened quite quickly. A lot of the venues were shut down. They're only just starting to re-emerge now. So I think a lot of people are still in that survival mode. So I think we've got to get past that survival mode and be thinking big picture, long term, and start to look at your spaces and think about how you can really utilise them in a better way.
Yeah.
They do it really, really well, really well.
Fantastic. And I think if anything, probably the last couple of days in New Zealand, and if we look to Europe and numbers increasing, has shown us that this will chop and change. That I'd love for some states in Australia to be back to normal and not be impacted again, but it will change, and we need to plan that this could be something that's in place for the next 12, 18, 24 months.
That's it.
And as just picking up on your survival mode comment, that's a really important one, because we know a lot of venues have had to stand staff down, or staff are on reduced hours, or event management companies or associations, any organisation has had to stand people down. We're not sitting in our offices twiddling our thumbs trying to think of sort of these gala ideas. It can be hard, and hopefully that's what today's conversation will just jog some ideas. But what I do say to people, and a lot of you will have heard me say this before, have a look at what's happening around you. If you're in a state that has opened up, go to restaurants, look at how they've changed. Look at what's happening overseas. My local bike shop has created the most amazing sort of process for when you go in, with the way it's put its social distancing, that you actually suddenly feel a lot more special than if you just wandered in as a customer and were roaming around the store. So don't just look within events, look at everything happening around you, because you just never know what idea that might spark.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's really, I think, too, about event planners when they're going to hotels to also work and be transparent. We talked about transparency, but be open about what you're looking for, and venues also to be flexible and adapt, and not have that, this is what we normally do kind of way of thinking, and be more open, because I think it's an opportunity for all of us as an industry to sort of pave the way of the events for how they're going to happen in the future. And if we start doing it now, we'll be set for 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is that two-way relationship. And
and
we're not just talking indoor venues of hotels, we're talking large, venues like the showgrounds or, music festivals.
Yeah.
That two-way conversation. And as an event manager, I know I'll start to look at the full floor plan, not just the room I'm using. And if I see a space that I think actually we could spread out into that, or maybe this could, now be used for such and such, I'll say to the venue, what about that room? Rather than expect that the venue is just going to know what's in my head.
Yeah, that's right.
But I also hope that the venue will say, look, do you know that we're now using this breakout room for such and such, or we've expanded this pre-function area, or we're moving into a second room for picnics,
Yeah.
And as you say, hybrid events is a big thing with venues at the moment.
Yeah, it really is. And also for clients and people booking events now, I think it's being able to have a hybrid event is sort of eliminating one hurdle for booking an event. I think venues need to be really flexible, though, in their contracts, cancellation policies, force majeure, in terms of leaving people that possibility to adapt. So I have an event we're looking at for next year in March. It's going to be in Australia, but they know how many people are attending. So say it's 100 people, but now they're saying, right, if only 50 can get there, can we then convert it to a hybrid event? So I'm currently working with venues, trying to get them to be a little bit flexible, especially in cancellation terms, so that the event can go ahead. And I think that's a big thing. But hybrid events, I think, are going to be that thing that gets us over the next stage. Yes. So we have a small event happening in September. It's only 20. but not all of them will attend. So again, they're doing a hybrid event for these guys, so they'll be dialing in from all over Australia. And I mentioned earlier the American one, obviously they can't get here, so they'll be doing a hybrid event with their Australian delegates. Yep. So as long as there's flexibility and a way forward, I think that will help us get across that bridge to going back to some sort of sense of normality.
Yep. And I know we'll throw to Kelly a little bit later, but she's got some really interesting examples, exciting examples of how things are working.
Yeah.
So to Alana at the Arts Centre Melbourne, a fantastic venue, and I will admit bias that I have run events there. I love it. But it's an interesting venue because it is a theatre space, so it's a public theatre space, but it also is has venue hire spaces. Alana, how has COVID impacted you?
Well, where do you start, really? Literally overnight, doors open, hosting international shows at the time. The theatres department were putting on a show called Age of Topum. We'll have lots of international acts and artists coming over. And literally overnight we had to close. There were private events using our private event spaces, and they literally we went home one day and that was kind of it. So touching on what Carla said before, just in regards to taking that human approach to contracts, having you don't want to lose any of your clients, looking at postponing where possible, keeping the honouring pricing, and if you want to host your event next year, let's sort of do that as well. We really didn't know how long this was going to be here for. Initially it was the 4 weeks, and then it keeps getting extended, and it's now 5 months, I think, to the day almost. So it's quite a long time to think about ensuring that you're looking after all your clients. One thing that we did have to do is literally turn into a digital broadcasting business overnight. The theatres department worked with, they ended up creating a big night in with John Foreman and the Aussie Pops Orchestra, and showcasing a lot of Australian artists, and trying to bring, hosting a venue where you have everyone coming to you for your show. You're having to completely turn that on its head and go out to the audience online, and not even having the potential response or the emotional response of an actual audience there has been a bit of a hurdle as well, I know, for some artists too.
Yeah, and that's a couple of points I want to pick up on there. The human approach, and I think the Arts Centre has done that incredibly well, because you have kept in touch with us this whole way, and I think it's called, while the curtain's down, or behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Told us what you've been up to, and even though you're not there, I know, they're still working on stuff, right? I can still go to them, and then. That notion of people usually come to us, to them, and just as a side note, from reimagining spaces, there's some fantastic events doing this around Australia at the moment where they can't run in person this year. So the ECA, off the top of my head, the Melbourne Writers Festival and the Melbourne Film Festival, and they've gone online, which I know wouldn't be their preference, but they're maintaining engagement with people. And I've attended the Melbourne Writers Festival for the first time. Loved it. I'll go to the the in-person one. So for anyone who's had to postpone their event, but think about what you can actually take out to people. The ECA online, I think you can watch a live feed in the animal nursery, which I think but think about how you can stay engaged during this time. Okay, back to venue spaces. So the Arts Centre is, you've got your traditional venue hire spaces like the pavilion where you run lunches, conferences, dinners. You've got boardrooms. Then you've got actual theatres. So you've got sort of traditional and then non-traditional venue hire spaces. How are you rethinking those for when live events return?
Look, it's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, we haven't even been able to get into the building to do all these things. We're looking at doing some, really blue sky thinking at the moment. Definitely safety first is number one priority for us, moving back into hosting events. The other thing that we are definitely exploring is the extension of that technology and digital environment. You're looking at your private events where you're having to change the way that we serve food. We were talking about vendor boxes before. At the moment, if you refer back to the restaurants, you can only have a plated meal. So instead of having those buffets for conferences, maybe we look at a plated lunch, having everyone spaced out. You're serving all of your food to the person, and then, you know, it's up to the people to be able to move around where they feel comfortable as well. We can certainly create a safe environment for those people. You know, looking at revised setups, we were talking about before, utilising the theatre spaces maybe instead of our private event spaces, because we have larger areas that can host normally 2,500 people, but maybe we only have 200 in there, and they're actually socially distanced in certain areas and certain seats. Using the technology, looking at 3D mapping. We can't get into the venue at the moment, so we're looking at, we've done some 3D mapping, so we can actually go on a Zoom call just like we're doing now and walk a client through the actual venue. Yeah. Moving forward, we're not going to be able to potentially use a lot of the venue spaces also, and breakout areas. So looking at, it's similar to a silent disco type scenario where you might have 3 or 4 different speakers in one room, but everyone's got their own headphones and you can tune into different speakers. Therefore, instead of having, you know, guests come through and spread out throughout your venue, which may or may not be a safe environment moving forward, creating that opportunity where you can have your own space, have your own seat, and for each session, just literally tune in to a different speaker. Yep. So those options are there also.
And we've just got a comment that I think it was very timely talking about that. And anyone who attended AIM, the expo this year in Melbourne, would have experienced that we're on a really loud, chaotic, busy expo floor. In a corner was the professional development workshops, and you put on your headphones, and you had that moment of, oh, the speaker's very quiet, and then of course you put on your headphones and realise you're listening. So I love that, thinking about how technology in your spaces, so moving away from that traditional experience of everyone in one room. Now, obviously not everything that'll work for with workshops or interactive things, but don't be, we shouldn't be sort of boxed in by just walls that we've got, but you can spread people out. We know with social distancing, capacities will potentially, well, some capacities will reduce. Alana, I know you've talked about VIP experiences that you're starting to explore and looking at other ways you can deliver experiences in the venue. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, for us here in Melbourne, going back into our venues, we will be looking at, we can't have the hundreds and thousands of people attending a show or a private event, you know, for the foreseeable future. But in the slow reopening of the building, what we can certainly look at is to those real VIP experiences where you can go on a backstage tour, and you might want to go and have a look at how, you know, the history, go through it, have a look at the arts, or the art on the wall, and those sorts of VIP experiences where you might have a beautiful dinner in an event space or a foyer, or even on the stages, where those opportunities wouldn't have been able to happen before. And it's about cross-collaboration, new ways of thinking, you know, working with other departments for us that we normally wouldn't necessarily work with, and looking at those ways of actually reimagining what we can do in events and how we can connect back with our clients, with our attendees, you know, with just even as the general public, having those sorts of options.
Yep. No, that's great. And particularly that working with other departments that perhaps you haven't worked as closely with previously. And I know I'll touch on that in a moment with Kelly. And it's important, isn't it? And I know I had 10 events in one day cancelled, postponed, thankfully not cancelled, in May to next year, but we know the event is going to look very different to what it would have looked like this year because our capacity is going to be reduced. So rather than just, you know, straight postpone, straight reschedule and just go exactly the same format, this actually gives us an opportunity to say, okay, well, if we can't have this many people in the foyer arriving at once, do we stagger them and do we start them, you know, if it was at the art centre, do they arrive at different times and go on a small tour and then stagger the times coming into the room?
And other things is that, you know, that event managers and companies want to, you know, you have a date, you have set your date, you're wanting to work towards that date, and you're wanting to not necessarily have to cancel or postpone, you're still wanting to engage with your clients. So working with other people, other even, you know, your neighbouring venues, about how we can work together and collaborate and cross-reference to support those events moving forward. You might not be able to have 100 people in a room and say, you know, 3 weeks before that there's another lockdown, but you can only have 20 people. Maybe there is that 20 people, but you are broadcasting to the rest, or you might be working with another venue, or maybe there's 5 venues around that can host 20 people each, and having that cross collaboration also.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we've got people commenting about the digital aspect that while virtual events will obviously never replace live events, it does open up opportunities while we're in this new world that, you know, you can spread across venues. But hook up with the digital content. And
I think it's been a bit of a scared thing for people in the past, like, oh, technology, it may or may not work. You know, at that time where things have failed, or even, you know, even at home now where we are and just, oh, my internet's out and those sorts of things. Actually, it's almost closing the gap between the audiovisual companies and things that they can do now, and that's their time to shine, and we can certainly move forward in the events industry showcasing that too.
Yeah. And look, a lot of this actually isn't new. And I think back to a little anecdote of my sister going to the Brownlow medal. Anyone in Victoria knows that. We got all excited and realised she was in the room. She wasn't in the main room. She was in the secondary room, which was full of sort of the sponsors and the corporates. But they got the live feed from the main room. They still had the dinner. It was still the same setup. So, you know, and this is 10, 15 years ago. So this has been happening where we've been using different rooms and using technology to sort of beam in there. So Kelly, I might throw to you in Brisbane, where we are seeing events run, you know, and they're slowly starting back, which is fantastic. Yes. Do you want to tell us about how COVID impacted you and some of the stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, very similar to Alana, everything just went on hold. Luckily for us, we went into postponement with a lot of our events, which is great. They didn't cancel, so we just postponed them to 2021. So we really want to be really flexible and work with our clients and make sure that we are still holding the event. So yes, we've extended all our events until 2021. So, yeah. But, you know, for us, you know, we've had to look at, you know, minimum catering spends and review them, you know, based on the numbers that we can actually do in our grand ballroom and in our spaces. Because previously you may have been able to do 300 in our ballroom, but now you can only do 100 with social distancing. So, of course, a client's not going to be able to meet that previous minimum catering spend. So really adjusting them and, you know, floor plans, of course, and reinstalling will, I suppose, making our cleanliness a major priority in the hotel, of course, in those plans.
So if we think about social distancing, and obviously that impacts rooms, do you want to tell us about some of your events where you're repurposing rooms or spreading it out across rooms, what you're doing there?
Absolutely. So I'm working with a client at the moment, and we've got an event coming up in November, actually. And it's a 250 packs event, and instead of obviously postponing it, what we're going to do and what we're doing is splitting that event. So we're going to do half in our ballroom, and we're going to do half on our pool deck, and we're going to live stream. So what Carla was just talking about, that real hybrid event, and that's what we're getting a lot of is, you know, if it's not the larger events, it's the smaller ones, and we're kind of doing like a road show. So where you'll be in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and you'll be tapping into that hybrid and live streaming from each of the states, which is fantastic. So yeah, so that's one of the things. And I just saw one of the questions from Linda, which was just perfect and timely.
Great segue.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I'm actually working with a client of mine, and they've got their head office in Japan. And so what we're doing is we're actually doing a gala dinner where we do the entree in Japan and we do the mains in Brisbane, and then we live stream again, and then you can actually in Japan, you can talk about all the latest features and facilities that are happening with the company, and then stream back to Brisbane. So it's fantastic. You know, this COVID has really opened up the world to us, and I know that previously the world has always been open to us, but as you know, Alana was just mentioning that, you know, AV has always been a bit of a scary thing. Like it's, you know, will it drop out? But, you know, now we have that technology that we know is more safe and reliable, where we can actually go and tap into not only interstate, but internationally, and really connect in a hybrid way, as what Carla was just saying, during this time, you know, on this unforeseen time, to keep events going. So yeah,
absolutely. And I want to pick up on Linda's note. I love the work you're doing with Japan and Brisbane. I think it's terrific. And I want to come back to you because I know you're working with other venues, you know, and sort of find out about that. Linda, it is a trick with the time zones. I guess we can't all, you know, we are all in this. So I've, you know, attended UK webinars at ungodly hours. I've spent hours working out time zones to find a time that would suit Sydney, the UK, you know, New York. So you can make it work. And, you know, if it ends up being early morning for Australia to suit the time in America or vice versa, let's make the most of that. You know, we can play on the fact that we're down under, that we're on a time zone, you know, join breakfast, or, you know, things like, I mean, we always say we're from the future because we're ahead of everyone. Now make it fun and say, you know, back to the future with breakfast in Melbourne. And so you can, you'll never get a great time zone, but it'll be, you know, 8 a.m. maybe and 7 p.m. their time. But we can be creative with how we position it. But it does mean you probably will be rethinking your program. You know, it won't be, if you move in a conference, it won't be an 8 a.m. Till 5 p.m. that'll suit the whole world, but it might be carved up into chunks, or it might be a previous gala dinner that will for someone else be a breakfast, but you can actually make that fun.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. It's tough when you want to chat with people. But I think, you know, we are probably the minority. You know, we get treated a little bit less down here with our time zone in Australia. But I think everyone across the world has been used to dialing into webinars at all sorts of different times. Yeah. So this wouldn't be the first time that would happen. But let's make the most of it. Let's play on the novelty of it. So Kelly, you were talking about, you know, working with other venues. So not just thinking about your spaces. Tell us a bit more about how you're working with other venues around Australia or even in Brisbane.
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, well, I'm a part of Marriott, which is global, we're one of the largest hotel companies in the world. So we're able to obviously tap into our sister properties, which is fantastic and easy. But, you know, another idea too, which, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be, you know, in just, you know, one brand. Like you can, so for instance, just say you had your conference like in Brisbane and you had 300 people, yet of course you can't fit 300 people everywhere. So, you know, you have 100 people at one hotel and another 100 in another hotel. And again, you live stream it and maybe you theme it like, you know, one's a Westin Cowboys theme and one's a Hawaiian theme. But, you know, and so everybody's still in the one state. So you just, yeah, again, working with other hotels and making them happen. I mean, you know, this hybrid event will never replace that connecting of having of events, because we all need to connect. It's the best way, especially for like, you know, there's events that really rely on trade and expos where they need to be promoting their products. So this is, you know, it's like it's an addition, it's an add-on, it's something that we can add to our events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess, apologies, the jackhammering I think is above me. But if we think about, you know, venue spaces and hybrids events, so you've got some of your delegates at your venue, you've got some tuning in. Don't forget those tangible things that you might be able to send to your delegates who are joining in as a hybrid. You know, if it's Westin, you know, it might be some fantastic chocolate from Brisbane or some honeycomb from New Farm or whatever it is, so that they still feel connected. So think about, you know, really think about the venue you're tuning into and what's special about that venue that you can still send to those
little gifts.
We actually did, I did a Zoom webinar. Well, actually we changed to Microsoft Teams, but I actually did a webinar just to connect with my PCOs and my top clients. And we actually did a salsa and sangria evening. So I actually teach dancing. So I did a little salsa class online, as well as what we did is we actually emailed all the participants a sangria recipe, and we made it online. So another way to just, to connect with your guests. Another thing that you can do is we were, for instance, looking at actually sending guests, bottles of wine, like, to their companies, just so they could, jump online for the networking at the end. So there's always those opportunities. Another thing that we have done as well is just to keep connected, is we've been doing these beautiful picnics in the botanical gardens, which is behind us, and again, that's just to still connect with our clients. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to still connect.
Absolutely. And I really love the botanical garden dining experience, because that has come out of a negative in that you can't fit people in eating, but to the delegate, they've suddenly got this new experience that they've never would have had. So they don't actually see the downside that we know is the work behind the scenes.
Yes.
The solution. So once again, great use of venue space around you, not just in your walls. Do you want to tell us, I think you were doing some off-site picnics, Kelly?
Yes, what we were just saying. About those? Yeah. So just, the off-site picnics in the botanical gardens, with our clients. And you know what, and again, we had to obviously be mindful of the social distancing, so we had it all spread out, which was lovely. But it's, hotels, we can obviously do, and especially in our hotel, is offsite catering, where we can, send offsite catering to a spot. So for instance, like the botanical gardens, or even offices and things like that. So if you do need to stay in the offices and you're live streaming, we can send out catering to you. There's a lot of things, that, hotels and events can do. It's just thinking outside the box. So the picnics idea was just one of them, just to make it a bit different.
Can I just say the important thing there is making sure, what you were saying, Kelly, is that venues can do this. And as we're planning events and as event planners, we need to be working with venues, be open to what venues can do, but keep that conversation, start the conversation.
Definitely. Yeah, it's exactly that, working together. Like, we all want to keep events connected, both parties, everyone. So it's coming up with these different ideas. Have you thought about this? Can we do this? And just really working together to make it happen. Yeah.
And just following on from that, I'd really recommend people to, if you're doing some great stuff, and by all means, pop it in the chat function. And I love seeing some of the plugs that people are putting for their business, because this is what it's about. It's, about sharing information, saying, hey guys, do you know we can help you by doing this? Share stuff on LinkedIn too. If you've run a fantastic event with, and you were so proud of the way you social distanced, or you did a creative picnic in the Botanic Gardens, take photos, share that, because that's where we're going to get our ideas and strengthen our industry by sharing of information. Virtual tastings, absolutely. I know a lot of wineries, particularly in Melbourne, are doing those. There's all sorts of virtual things going on, which is fantastic. Silent team building, and so, and as Carla said, it's really venues and event managers, or whether it's external or in-house event managers, working together, because as a venue, you might not have thought of something. Someone comes along and says, do you know, I've seen this done here, could we do that here? Actually, we could, and then they offer it to the next client. So and then if you're a venue, just throw up ideas. And as I said, we're not trying to make it onerous, and we're not about knocking down walls or things like that, but just thinking creatively that, and if you look at history and recessions, is when the most startups come out of recessions, because people are forced to be creative. And I think we will see some amazing creativity come out of this hand that we were dealt, because it's forced us to, and Kelly saying already, and Alana, doing experiences that you hadn't previously considered. You didn't need them. Now we need them, and imagine, what we can sort of come up with, which is fantastic. So we've got a bit of time for questions, and I know I'm just going to skip back here. There was one about social distancing.
Yeah, I can certainly sort of start to answer that one. I think it's from Gemma. With social distancing, I mean, we as venues, as event managers, we need to provide the safest option possible. How that is transformed across to positioning within a room, maybe it's staggering start time, so maybe it's access in and out of a room, going digital with your registration, whether it's everyone has their own individual tables, similar like it used to be at the old school tables, like those used to be, and maybe it is staff coming in and utilising a plated style service. From there, it is actually up to the individual to manoeuvre their way around the room. I mean, I know what level of responsibility comes with that. It is a little bit of a self-responsibility as well, and that's something that you can certainly communicate to your attendees prior to your event. What you are as a manager doing, what the venue is doing, and then what the expectation of you as attendees doing. So I think it's across all facets of that, and I think it's a holistic approach.
Yeah. And I'll throw to Kelly in a moment, but for anyone who's been involved in mass scale events and maybe smaller ones, there is a lot of work done around, it's called crowd science. So it actually is understanding how people move, what their motivations, and there's lots of examples of, you know, car parks and how to draw people to particular areas by placing toilets in an area. Yeah. People will be drawn to those sort of things. So while it's up to the responsibility of, you know, the venue and the event to ensure you've got everything in place, and it's, you know, we've got to have some responsibility for the individuals that they're doing the right thing. Think about how you actually plan your space. You know, if you put all your registrations, or I mean, not that we'll probably have registrations, but if you put all the key tables in one spot that people need to go to, you're going to get a bottleneck there. Yeah. You know, if you have one station that people go to pick up a gift bag or something, you will get a bottleneck there. So think about how you can place certain things that will draw people out. You know, barista carts will draw people, you know, around. So think about how just understanding the way your guests move and what their behaviour is of that. You know, they come to the venue and they go straight here. You know, if it's a music festival or, you know, the tennis, when people arrive, they go straight to the toilet or a food vendor. You know.
The other thing to throw in the mix there, Georgie, is also, you know, we used to have fire wardens. Maybe we have a COVID safety warden, you know, someone who goes and is just a little bit, you know, not necessarily doing it, like telling people off, but like certainly looking at things and saying maybe, oh, just gently, maybe just wait a little bit or stand back, and having that person, or maybe it's a couple of people that are assisting to be able to help with safety and space.
And certainly some of the, I know there was a big expo, an outdoor expo in Queensland recently where they had, you know, some terrific high-vis vests that said the COVID safe team, or it was, you know, a fun way to position it. Kelly, over to you.
Yeah, no, I was actually just about to just echo really what you were just saying, and also the same with Alana. So with the social distancing, like it is a shared responsibility, and of course, you know, as events and hotels and event planners, like we'll always put the floor plans out to show you where you can, like if you have, your registration desk in two different spaces, you know, you make it timed, exactly what you just said, stagger the timings, maybe have them in different locations. You can also do mobile apps and obviously check in online, and so then you don't have to have that bottleneck again. But it is a shared responsibility, and, you know, if you know that you have to stay 1.5 meters away from the other person, and also, you know, if you're sick, you obviously don't go to the conference. So again, it is a shared responsibility, but as events venues and planners, we will obviously, you know, map it out to make sure that it is COVID safe 100%.
Yeah. And, you know, and that's down to doing your tabletop exercise where you actually plot out everything on your floor plan. And if you can see that as soon as people walk in the room, you've put your barista cart, you know your behaviour that everyone will stop at that, then you're going to have a blockage of people not being able to get through and keeping a distance. So actually plotting it on your A3 bit of paper and understanding the flow, and that's when you'll start to move stuff. And it's around education, all the pre-communication to people about not coming if you're sick, you know, keeping your distance, but then understanding human behaviour and how you can guide and sort of manage that by where you place things. So we did have a question actually prior to the webinar around venues upholding social distance and someone going to venues where no one had done that. I might I'll talk from an event manager point of view, but I might talk to Kelly from a venue point of view. What would you say to someone that has found that, you know, a venue hasn't been social distancing?
Ooh, if they haven't been social distancing, well, again, I'll go back to that. It is a shared responsibility, but yes, of course, like in that pre-planning, you would have planned where you're going to have your registration desk or your break times, for instance. I know for us with our breaks, we're doing a couple of different options for you, but like individual plates for morning and afternoon tea. We're also doing bento boxes and things like that, so people can sit back down into their on their desks instead of standing up. So again, we'll always put those measures in place, but it still is up to the individual person to make sure that they are keeping space.
Can I just jump in there, Georgie, too, and say, if that does happen, that's where the onus comes on us to let the venue know too. Because, I mean, we all grow from feedback, positive and negative, and we're all in it together. We're learning as we go, really, because things are changing so rapidly. So I think it's really important to give feedback, and there's a nice way of doing it that's not offensive, but just being open and honest about it helps them improve for the next group or the next experience that someone else might have. So I think it's just tell them.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And you know, there's two elements, whether you're the event manager or whether you're the guest. And if you're the event manager, the first thing I would be asking is, do you have a COVID safe plan? Yep. You know, and it doesn't need to be 40 pages. It could be 2 pages, but it clearly sets out what their responsibilities. Talk with your venue contact. You know, how will we do this? How will we plan for this? How will you manage this? And you will get a sense of confidence in how far the venue is in their understanding and their readiness to run COVID safe events. And I've talked about before, doing site visits where one venue sort of looked at me completely blankly when I asked about it. The other venue, yep, we've got this, we know that we're reduced to this capacity, we're re-looking at serving this way. And you were like, oh, wow. And you can guess which, venue we went with. If you're a guest, I echo what Carla says, just talk to the venue. And I'll give you an example, a local coffee shop, 3 times, I just gently said to them, oh, what are you doing around spacing of your tables? And what are you doing around this? In a very polite way, I should say. And, it was a very slow process, and they were clearly not social distancing the way they had their tables laid out. Yeah. One day I go in, they've got this whole new setup with arrows, with flow. And I said, wow, this is fantastic. And they said, this has come from our patrons. It's our customers that told us they want that. So you can make a difference. So, and I know early on there were memes going around saying, don't name and shame venues on social media. Go to them directly and just say it. And you know what, maybe they don't know. Maybe they're struggling, or maybe they are, negligent, but go to them first and ask and, see. And you can, if you know what the social distancing is, you can let them know that as well. So, yeah. Now, in true technology style, my chat has frozen, so I'm not actually able to see if there's any other questions. So I might throw to...
there's one there about temperature checking at events. I know some of the hotels are doing it. Some hotels do it as part of just the whole conference experience. Then there's other hotels that are charging for it. So I guess as an event planner, just make sure you are aware of if you're going to be charged for it or not, and ask that straight up. But Kelly and Alana, over to you guys. Are you temperature checking? You're not even open, Alana.
No.
So you're not. Are you, Kelly?
I mean, we are planning our events, but the temperature checking, look, we can absolutely do it. I mean, I know that we're doing the mask. Like we all have to wear masks at Marriott, and that's with all our properties. So we actually wear face masks in every level, every floor, every staff member. That is a standard. In terms of the actual temperature checking, look, yeah, just ask us if you want us. If that's something that you want us to do, then absolutely 100% we can do it.
Kelly, there's another question there just in regards to contact tracing. Are you you asking your clients to do or guests to use the app, or are you actually doing the contact tracing yourself? Whereabouts are you with that?
So when it comes to like the larger events, if we just require to get for the event organisers to get a list of the attendees and to then give us a copy of that list of attendees.
Sure.
So then we've got that on file as well.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on the temperature testing. Temperature testing is one element. It's not tick the box. So if you're going to temperature test, what's your process for if someone has an irregular temperature? Yeah. What's your process for letting them in? For, do you move them to another area? What do you do around people who've been close to them? So just think about it. It's not just a simple, yes, you can come in or you can't come in. Consider what will happen if someone doesn't want to have their temperature tested. So everyone's clear on it, because the last thing you want to do is say, right, we're going to temperature test, comes to the event and you get a temperature that may indicate COVID. What do you then do? Do you set aside an area for, and I mean, if we look at sort of quarantining hotels, maybe that's not a good example, but like a safe bubble. So if you have a guest that comes along and is showing signs and has a temperature, is there a room that you move them into that is a bubble, for want of a better word? Because imagine you've got a really busy pre-function area and you've now got someone potentially displaying the symptoms, and you're pushing them back through that area and potentially coming into contact. Do you move them to an area while everyone else moves into the conference room? So just starting to think about what the flow-on effect could be for that.
Yeah, that's true. Great point.
And I think with that contract tracing is, people need to know that their information is being held. It's around that education and that communications as well.
Yeah.
So Alana, what sort of, before we close, what sort of things are you working on behind the curtain at the moment?
Definitely looking at a lot of the digital and broadcasting options for when we are able to get into the building. Looking at those options of having a unique opportunity of using the stages now that they're not able to be used for theatre shows, having that beautiful broadcast background. Looking at even some of the collections teams are doing some 3D mapping with a few of their garments that they've got. If you have a look at the Art Centre website, there is a lot of the Big Night In that we were talking about earlier in regards to the digital broadcasting, and that's all on there as well. So really, at the moment, everyone's turning everything on its head and actually exploring different ideas, connecting. There's a great Art Centre initiative, which is the Arts Wellbeing Collective, providing assistance to those, if anyone in the performing arts, in regards to wellbeing and mental health. So there's a real community focus on supporting people, and especially for us in our industry, not just the private events industry, but also the arts industry as well, and the performing arts. Everything has literally stopped overnight. So just looking at trying to really connect with those people and still try and actually provide those services to the wider audience.
Yes, yeah. Fantastic. And I know we've got some people from music festivals on here. So I will, unfortunately, I can't put the links in the chat function, but I will send the links out so you can get in touch with Carla, Alana and Kelly, and also access that blog that Alana's been talking about. That'll come out in an email this afternoon, along with the recording of this, because, I do recommend you go on and just have a look. You just never know what might be there. So Kelly, I want to know what you're serving for main course. Do you know your progressive, kind of, your old style progressive dinner, where we'd go from one venue to another for each meal. which that's another idea we can think of when using space. But do you know what sort of entree in Japan and main in Australia is going to look like?
No, we haven't gone to the menu selection just yet. But of course, like, we just liaise with the other hotels and we can find out. But yeah.
Keep us posted.
And Carla, what are some of the things, you know, the inquiries you're getting in for live events? Do you find they've changed, or are people sort of hoping to get back to the same type of events they were running?
Look, I think people are hopeful and they want to be returning to normality as soon as possible. But I think in light of, honestly, what's happened the last couple of weeks, there's, I think, an awareness coming about that, hey, back in March, I think people were like, oh, it's a flu, you know, we'll get over it.
Yeah.
And I think 5 months on, I think people are starting to take it more seriously. So I think there's more of a need for that hybrid event. And really, I think it's something venues need to think about in terms of cancellation policies and how that's going to work, because there is a bit of a concern around the cost. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, but hybrid events cost so much. You know, I believe things go in swings and roundabouts. So if someone's going to wipe 50% off their accommodation because they're going to now attend virtually, it's just a matter of redirecting those funds at times. But I just think it's about hotels going, okay, if we have to wash 50% off, but the other people can attend, then we can, you know, refund that or X amount of dollars back to you. And I think that's the sort of things we're dealing with currently with hotels. But I think people are hopeful. I think that hybrid event will be that bridge and will get us over to the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit earlier about how you can keep your hybrid guests engaged. And, you know, most hotels and venues package up their own biscuits or chocolates or, you know, fun little goodies. So what can your hotel particularly do that continues your branding and that experience, but someone, you know, in Melbourne gets this great little package from the Westin in Brisbane when they can't be there in person, but they're dialing in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Because I'm still frozen here.
No, there's just a few comments. You know, a few people are commenting on cancellations. But as you know, we're speaking, a lot of people are quite flexible within the environment also. Yeah.
So this is the second panel discussion we've run about the new world of events. And as I said, you will receive a recording in an email this afternoon and links to everyone's details. But we're also keen to know from you if there's a particular area you're interested in us talking about for the next one, whether it's food service, contracts cancellation, technology. Please just respond in the email because we'd love to hear from you. So I wish everyone a wonderful and safe weekend. For those of us in Melbourne, we just buckle down with our trendy, you know, single origin bespoke masks and get out and about. Everyone around Australia, we wish you a wonderful weekend. We might be locked down in Melbourne, but we're certainly loving seeing events popping up around the country and get a lot of confidence and excitement out of that. So all the best, and we look forward to seeing you at our next panel discussion. Thanks, everyone.